Good morning. It's Wednesday, July 27th, 2022, and welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standard's daily news, interview, event, meme, you name it, show. Most of all, it's an opinion show. Some people get a little confused on that sometimes, and I share my opinion on here. You don't always have to agree with it. In fact, a lot of people don't all the time. But if you got a problem with it, hey, get over yourself. We're here for my opinion. Share your opinions here as well, though. We've got the comments scroll on the go, guys. Send me what you think, good, bad, indifferent. Talk to each other about things. Check in from where you're at all over. It's good to see you guys coming in from all across the country and across the province. Just try to keep things a little civil. You know, we had some issues with people commenting on one of our stories on the website itself, getting way out of bounds. And unfortunately, we just had to shut off the comments, and that's no good. We want to have that exchange. But unfortunately, some nut bars and really nasty people can ruin those things now and then. All right, let's see what else we got going on today. So we got a couple of daily observances to cover before I get into what I'm going to be talking about. You know, I like talking about these as we get people checking in and tuning into the show. Melissa out in Oshawa, Russell out in Saskatchewan. It's good to see y'all coming in. So it is Barbie in a blender day. Yes, if you got a Barbie laying around, you've got a blender laying around. This is the day to put it in a blender. I don't know where they come up with these things. But if you want to traumatize a young child or you just have a beef with Barbie or whatever, I don't know. This is the day to put it in the blender, though. Grind her up and put her behind you. I guess if you wanted to go the other way, you could put a Ken doll in the blender as well and just make sure that he isn't pregnant. So get your Barbie in its blender. It's also, this is one I can relate to, but I can't celebrate. And it's National Scotch Day. Oh, I so miss Scotch. It's the smell of it, that first taste of it when you've had just a drop of water and a good single malt. Unfortunately, I abused my privileges. No longer can consume it, but it's not like I didn't get my share in while I could anyways. But for those who are responsible, get out there, enjoy a good glass of Scotch. There's some fantastic ones out there. Just try not to go into a battle to see the bottom of the bottle with it, or it can turn a little detrimental for you. All right, let's see here. We've got a couple of great guests today. Author of Unmasked. His name is Ian Miller. He does a lot of writing for the Brownstone Institute. And yeah, his book was Unmasked, The Global Failure of COVID Mask Mandates. So yeah, you can see where we're going to go with these discussions, because the push is coming on in the States and here to bring back the mask mandates. They're all warning us, the mainstream media, saying, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. We're coming into the umpteenth wave this fall. So let's talk to him about how well those mandates have been working around the world. And Dr. Tammy Nemeth, she's a historian, host of the Nemeth Report, and again, has a very strong focus on energy issues. We're going to talk about some of those I call it flagellation on the part of the industry and international pressures pushing the industries to basically shut themselves down, appeasement, and it's not doing anybody any favors. Meanwhile, Putin is expanding Russian oil export capacity. All right, let's start with a good news story with our rant. I'm going to give some background. I've been something of a dedicated news watcher since I learned how to turn on a TV as a child and since learning how to read. I devoured newspapers at every chance. I was something of a dork that way, and I still am now. Never in all my reading have I seen such an obsessive persecution and attempted prosecution of a Canadian citizen as I have with Tamara Lich. It's descended into polarized madness. I mean, we got a frothing social media mob comprising of everybody from average citizens to established media members, and they're waving figurative pitchforks and demanding that a non-violent, diminutive grandmother remain locked up for months awaiting trial on mischief charges. Are they so lost in their frenzy that they can't stop a moment and look at themselves, listen to themselves? Do they really want to live in a society where activists protesting the state can be jailed indefinitely over an offense so petty as having taken a selfie next to the wrong person? It's repugnant to behold. It really is. And I hope some of these folks can really take a breather and bear in mind that precedents are being set, and some of their beloved left-wing activists might face similar treatment in the future once the government changes. And I would oppose the treatment of them too, by the way. I support the freedom to protest for left and right. Protesters have crossed the line and found themselves facing criminal charges since the beginning of Confederation. Never, though, has a peaceful protester faced such a malicious prosecution as Tamara Lich has. I mean, in searching, it's not hard to find examples of protesters who have long criminal histories and been charged with assaulting police and all sorts of things, and they're immediately released on bail. We can find cases almost daily of sex offenders and other criminals with long violent histories too, and they're released on bail with fewer conditions than Lich. There's no doubt that this ongoing hysteric effort to jail Lich is politically motivated. The Crown prosecutor donated $17,000 to Trudeau's Liberals. He's more than just a casual supporter of the party. He also knows that if he can make a petty prime minister like Trudeau smile, he can find himself with a judicial appointment. Let's not pretend he isn't motivated by this, as he's been chastened in the courtroom repeatedly for his zealous actions. The Justice of the Peace who released Lich's, or refused to release Lich a couple weeks ago, could very well have been seeking promotion as well. I mean, he's just a bureaucrat and he wasn't even a lawyer. You got to climb that ladder somehow. When Lich's case has gone before real judges, though, they've ruled she's to be released. They understand the law, even if so many craven Trudeau fart catchers can't. Justice Goodman politely explained to an outraged Crown prosecutor yesterday how the law works as he ruled that Lich was to be released. Goodman noted that the two justices of the peace aligned themselves with the prosecutor, but two superior court justices didn't. It was sort of a polite way of saying the JPs were out of their depth. Goodman also pointed out the Crown needed to prove mens rea in the case. That essentially means proving Lich knowingly and purposely breached a bail conditioning. Taking a quick selfie didn't really meet that bar. Justice Goodman corrected the record on something that many Trudeau apologists keep claiming. He pointed out that she's not charged with sedition or inciting a riot. He said while the protests were of national import, the charges relate to minor offenses in the criminal code. And he finds it highly unlikely that a woman with no criminal record is going to spend any more time in jail. This is important. She's been charged with mischief, not sedition, not starting riots. He's also noting if she was convicted on the charges she has, she's already served enough days to cover any sentence in the future, in reality. This part of the ruling is critical. He says, I take judicial notice of the harm caused by the Freedom Convoy to the citizens of Ottawa and governments, but no court should seek to control the possession of political views. In a roundabout weighing, he's implying the persecution of Lich to date has been politically motivated. Now, he won't say it, but I will. Tamara Lich has been a political prisoner. The judge ordered the shackles to be removed from the grandmother and that she be released. She hasn't been found not guilty by the courts, but she still has she presents no risk to society in being free while she awaits trial. Only the most fanatical of people would think she presents any real risk to the public. Lich's travails are far from over, but another of the absurd assaults on her freedom has been lifted, at least for the time being. We're witnessing political persecution and travesty of justice in real time in a nation that used to pride itself on freedoms. History is not going to look kindly upon this year's events in Canada with Tamara Lich. All right. That's what's got me going today. Like I said, welcome to freedom, Tamara. Glad to see you out. Hopefully there's no little petty thing that gives them an excuse to lock you up again before trial time. Let's check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what else is happening out there. Excuse me.
Holy cow, Cory, look at you speaking Latin and all.
Yes, 2 words in a row. But I had to look up the translation.
Well, you're old enough. You probably studied it at school, right?
I think they put me through a little bit of it at Shawnigan Lake, but it's hard for it to kind of stay in the memory.
Has your email inbox slowed down with all the hate venom that you were getting yesterday?
It's slowed down, yeah, but the crazy internet squirrels had a lot of love to share with me because I dared give a critical commentary on one of the UCP leadership candidates. Sometimes I don't like our listeners.
No, sometimes they can be very cruel and hurtful. I too have felt their vitriol. So I feel for you, Cory. Hopefully it'll stop soon. But we got a really busy day going. We got a really busy day going on. I'll start first with the breaking news that is not up on the website yet. RCMP in Surrey have announced an arrest in the murder of, excuse me if I mispronounce it, Donovan Malik. He was gunned down in Surrey a couple of weeks ago. You'll remember he was acquitted of helping bomb the Air India flight, killed more than 300 people back in the day. A 23-year-old and a 21-year-old have just been arrested, and the RCMP will give out more details this afternoon. We've also got a breaking story on Leslyn Lewis, the CPC leadership candidate. She's again questioning why this third official debate from the party is going ahead, basically saying she's got better things to do. And also not up on the website, but coming within moments, Hockey Canada admits they have used their sort of savings fund to pay off 9 separate sex accusers of various Hockey Canada teams. more than $8 million, I believe the figure was. So Hockey Canada's scandal continues to grow. All of that will be coming up on the website soon. Already there, we have a bit of breaking news on the UCP campaign trail, where the Lethbridge East MLA, Nathan Newdorf, has come out, along with, I believe it's Peace River MLA Pat Wren, and they have thrown their support behind Danielle Smith in her bid to become Alberta Premier. We've got a David Creighton column on the aforementioned Tamara Lich and the ridiculous ordeal that that she went through. And we've got a story on everybody's favorite professor, Jordan Peterson, saying that, sorry guys, but the worst is yet to come under Trudeau. And we all know how popular Jordan Peterson is, so I'm sure that'll be highly read. And we've got a major study of North American cities and how they're rebounding after COVID. And because of the strict lockdown rules that were enforced in places like Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto, those places are performing some of the worst in North America. They're right at the bottom of the table for economic recovery, and the strict COVID lockdown requirements are being blamed for that. And we've got a David Parker column on the state of the aforementioned UCP leadership race. And a good story from our friends at the CTF. You know, if you want to get rid of a weapon, have it destroyed, all you have to do is take it to your local police station, and they'll handle that for you for free. But with the Freedom of Information request papers, they've discovered the Canadian government, the Liberals, paid more than $1,000 to destroy one shotgun. So if you want to see what a boondoggle that all those new gun laws are going to be, this is just sort of the first example of it. And we've got the Ethics Committee in Ottawa voting to hold an investigation to see whether they're being spied upon by the RCMP. And we've got yet another story on how police forces were able to get a blacklist of people who had supported the Freedom Convoy as it rolled into Ottawa. The police had all the names of their supporters on hand, given to them by a federal bank. So really a lot of good stuff on there, Cory, already, and I've mentioned the new breaking ones to come. They'll all be up within moments, so lots to read today.
Right on. Well, looking forward to it, and appreciate the update. I'll let you get back at it. We'll see who else comes out in this crazy UCP race as they go around. I mean, it's a little different when one changes endorsements. You know, it's one thing to come out with a new one, but sort of crossing the endorsement floor, showing that there's some shifting views out there. Sure,
there is, and I'll remind everybody the first official UCP debate takes place tonight. It's in Medicine Hat, starting at 5 o'clock. Western Standard will be providing a live stream of it. So just click back here at 5 o'clock and you'll be able to watch it. And our Arthur Green in Edmonton will be doing a story on it.
Excellent. Well, lots to cover. I appreciate it, Dave, and I'll talk to you after the show. I'll discuss those tear stains on my pillow from some more of the emails I get from the upsets.
I'm sure they'll be very, very nasty people.
All right, Dave, thanks.
Bye-bye.
That is our news editor, Dave Naylor, giving the updates. As I said, lots coming out, lots breaking in the news. We're getting it up there as fast as it happens. And it's when I remind everybody the reason we can do this, the reason we have people across this country reporting, coming up with original content, columnists giving you original opinions, is because you guys have been subscribing in droves, in the thousands. This is how we beat the legacy media, guys. This is how we don't have to consume that stuff anymore, is through subscribing, through independent media like us who refuse to take any tax dollars. So you guys who have subscribed already, thank you very much. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, come on, get on there, guys. $10 a month, $99 for a year if you're going to take it out for a year. It's a good deal. It's cheaper than a newspaper subscription used to be when you used to get it delivered to your house, and you get dozens and dozens of daily stories out there keeping you up to date on what's going on. So again, thanks to those who have subscribed, and get on there and subscribe if you haven't yet. So yeah, you know, it's something we keep referencing. So I mean, it's funny, and this happens during leadership campaigns. People get emotional, they get very attached to their candidates, and they don't like hearing any critique, whether constructive or not, and they can get pretty wound up. So yesterday I opened up and I talked about that issue with Danielle Smith and what she said. And you know, the funny thing was, most of the people going haywire did it over the title of my monologue. They obviously didn't actually watch it, because I wasn't going after Smith in the monologue. I mean, I did say I felt she made a mistake with how she phrased things. I talked about how, as a former talk radio host, she's got to change her approach, perhaps strategically, if she wants to avoid stepping into the mire further. And, the news cycle for the last couple of days has been dominated by her statement. It's not doing her campaign favors. And it's not doing a campaign a favor to not point out that there was a mistake made, because there will be more mistakes made then. You don't want to lose the narrative. I mean, she's really been controlling it well. But the people went wild. You're shooting at Smith. And, oh, yeah, the Western Standard sold out to the mainstream media. Oh, get over yourselves, you clowns. Don't forget, please. I see some commenters, too. What kind of unbiased media is this? It isn't. I mean, our newsroom is unbiased. I'm an opinion guy. Opinion. Look up the word. Look up the definition. My show would be really boring if I just read news script. Then it's a news show like the TV news you turn on at night. This is an opinion show, guys, and you're going to get my opinion. Might not always be right. Don't worry. I know you'll call me out on that. Either way, just giving you the heads up. I'm still going to be speaking to critically and perhaps supportively of candidates as this campaign unfolds. And one or another people isn't going to like it when it happens. But it's just the way it goes, guys. Speaking of self-destruction, though, in a sense, and this is something that's come up. It's interesting. I just ate there last weekend. Valbella, it's a deli in Canmore. Some people might have seen the news. It's made national news now. And Valbella is a fantastic food. I mean, they do the turduckens there. It's a deli. They've been there since the late 70s, a long-established, older business in Canmore. And it's right across from a gemstone cutting shop where I do a lot of work for my father. So, I mean, I've gone to Valbella to eat a lot over the years, and it's a very busy spot. They've established themselves. Their products are served or were served all over the place, from the Fairmount Hot Springs to Sunterra, and lots of restaurants and, of course, lots of individuals. So I guess they were fundraising for the local Pride Parade and going around asking for sponsorships. Sorry, look at the comments. Asking for sponsorships for the Gay Pride Parade, and fine. And the owner of it sent back this email basically talking about trans groomers and calling them mental health issues. Whoa. And of course, the recipient of that email shared it and it went viral. And now they've said that he's been fired. Now he's got the last name of the owner. I've looked at the pictures. He's a younger fella. I'm just guessing he's the son of the original owner, the fellow who started it in the 70s. But it's, and that perhaps it's been split between him and his sister or something. I don't know. But my God, how fast all of the supporters and businesses that were buying from these guys have already been publicly saying, we're never buying from them again. Think harder, guys. If you're not interested, just say, no, I'm not interested. But to go on a tirade like that, this guy looks like might have completely destroyed a business that was 45 years in the making. I don't know if they're going to be recovered from this. If you've been there, it's been recently renovated space. It's kind of in the industrial area and in the north end of Canmore. Very expensive to lease property out that way. And I bet you their sales are going to cut at least in half over one ridiculous, intolerant email sent from a business owner. It's just noteworthy. And it's sad. Like I said, you can be upset. You don't have to agree with the Pride March or things like that. But boy, from a business perspective, then keep it to yourself. Just say, thanks, I'm not interested. And I know they put pressure on with a lot of these. I was saying to Jane the other day, it reminds me of everybody's watched that old Seinfeld episode with Kramer, and it was the march, I think it was an AIDS march. This is back in the 90s. He didn't want to wear the ribbon. He says, I support you guys and everything. I want to march with you. I just don't want to wear the ribbon. And of course, the crowd and the mob starts chasing him eventually because he just doesn't want to wear the ribbon. And they get a little pressuring with these businesses too. So you've got to sponsor the Pride March. You got to sponsor. If you don't sponsor it, you don't support us. Well, it doesn't mean you don't support. Just maybe you don't want to sponsor. So you can see why they get under the nerves sometimes if you get too pushy a salesperson. But don't respond like that. Either way, it'll be interesting to see if they can recover from this or not. It's just a terrible action on the part of a business against themselves. As Sylvia is saying, yes, Cory, it's an opinion podcast, so you shouldn't call out your commenters for their opinion when it differs to yours. Of course I will, Sylvia. Yes, this is my show. When I differ from you, I'll debate you, and I will call you out on it. That's what it's about. It's the interactivity. I mean, I don't expect everybody to always agree with me, but when they disagree, we will get at it. That's the way it goes. That's part of what's the fun. That's part of why we're live. Because, when you do recorded shows, those are good, and you can sanitize things and watch for it, but it's not nearly as fluid or interesting as when we do these live interactions and things such as that. So, hey, get on there. You don't have to agree with me. But yeah, when you get on my case in the comments, I'll come right back at you. That's half the fun. Okay, let's get to our guest, though, so you guys don't have to listen to me babbling interminably. And that's Ian Miller. He's an author of Unmasked, the global failure of COVID mask mandates. And he's been writing some great stuff in Brownstone Institute. And I've been looking forward to having him on. Hello, Ian. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So you're down in the States, but I mean, there's a whole lot of parallels between our countries. We're seeing the same moves, the same sort of motivations. The fear-mongering is being put on. It seems particularly with schools saying we've got to mask our children, we've got to mask them up, and disaster is going to come. But we can't pretend that we don't know how effective masks are anymore, can we?
Right. Well, and schools especially are really bad because there's been a lot of research done showing that there's no impact to masking in schools. One study that was just released that was really well done was about compared two school districts in North Dakota that were right next to each other. They had very similar demographics, similar vaccination rates, basically as identical as you can get without it being a randomized controlled trial. And there was absolutely no difference in cumulative case rates during the Omicron surge between the district that had a mask mandate and the one that didn't. So, we've made these comparisons over and over again. I've done this myself repeatedly, showed that school districts or, states or locations that have mask mandates to those that don't, and there's just no benefit to it. So it's a very consistent pattern. And yet these politicians just keep coming back to it because I guess they just don't have any other ideas of what to do or what to say.
Well, and that's what the kind of the question is, what is the motivation here? I mean, what's the benefit of going forward and imposing masking on kids? I mean, here we're seeing it's a lot of union push. We have a local federation of labor who's actually got a legal challenge trying to force masking in our schools. I mean, there's no medical basis for it, but they still are obsessive with this. Like, I just don't get why they're so hung up on it. I mean, if there really was some measurable benefit, even a small benefit, I can understand, but they can't pretend there is anymore.
Right. I don't really, look, we'll probably never get a perfectly straight answer from these people about what their motivations are. I think it's fear from themselves, among themselves. I think there's also this desire to be seen as being one of the smart, enlightened, intelligent people that follows the science and follows the experts. And, there's some kind of internal credibility that I think that comes with that from some people where they kind of get some sense of self-worth from saying I follow science and that makes me a smart person. Whereas those anti-maskers, they don't listen to the experts. I think some of them also just do believe that it works despite all the evidence. They get their news exclusively from a couple places that all have maintained this kind of fiction that masks have worked and mask mandates have worked. And so they haven't really ever had to engage with the evidence and the data suggesting the exact opposite.
And I'm guessing that with some of it, I mean, part of it with the mask too is it's a visible form of at least looking like you're doing something, right? It's a virtue signaling. It's wearing the wristband. At least when a legislator of some sort or somebody else can impose this, it can say, look how much this is benefiting people, just because at least people can see a visible sign of their policy in action, not necessarily the results.
Exactly. It's a very visible intervention. I think politicians especially grabbed onto it as well because it was seen as something that was low cost, whereas closing businesses and closing schools would be a high cost intervention. But telling people to wear masks in their mind doesn't have a lot of harms, so they figure, well, why not? We might as well look like we're doing something, and it won't be that destructive to our economic future. But I don't think that that's accurate. I think there are immense harms to it. Both kind of soft social harms as well as physical harms in some instances. And, it's also just not how we should be making decisions. You should be making decisions based off of evidence and data and science, which is what they claim to be doing, instead of just these feelings of, oh, well, it's a visible reminder that we're in a pandemic. And it shows you if I wear a mask, I care about you and that makes me a good person. So that's not how we should be making decisions as a society. And clearly it hasn't worked anyway.
No, and I mean, as you said, in a sense, soft social harms, I would even pretend that those harms aren't necessarily that soft. I mean, people often say it's harmless. Well, no, actually, there are measurable harms, particularly with kids. I mean, we're expressive creatures. When you mask up half of a person's face, I mean, that's where we display a lot of our nonverbal communication through, facial features. I mean, it's part of our development. It's what we do. And when you cover that, this causes harm. Absolutely, you can't avoid that.
Yeah, definitely. There was a research done in Germany where researchers basically just asked parents for a survey of, have your kids complained about mask wearing or come home and said anything to you about mask wearing? And the comments were pretty stunning. I think it was something like 70% of parents said their kids had increased feelings of anxiety. They were more nervous. They were stressed. They said it made learning more difficult. Seeing facial cues is incredibly important. We know this. And so covering teachers' faces, covering other children's faces in schools it's just inexcusable. And it's going to cause demonstrable harms going down the road. And as far as the soft social harms, meaning, we need to see that even with strangers interacting on the streets. And that's not just it's in every walk of life. You need to see people's expressions. And again, like you said, it might be a little bit more defensible if there was some demonstrable benefit. But every time we do these comparisons, that's what I did in the book. There's no difference in areas with mask mandates often do worse.
Well, that's it. I mean, to some degree, perhaps people could have been excused 2 years ago when we really didn't have the numbers and we weren't sure. People are in a bit of a panic. This is a new virus going around. I mean, it is real. So yes, let's get out there and mask people and see if it knocks it down. But at this point, I mean, you show it very well in your book and just in your recent Brownstone piece. Like the parallels are undeniable. The impact the masks are having is negligible.
Right, and one of my favorite examples of this, which was actually a recent one, and I live in Southern California, so this is kind of near and dear to my heart. But Los Angeles County in December of 2021 went around to 1,500 businesses over the course of a week and measured mask compliance, and it was over 95% of people they said were wearing masks in the stores, and then cases immediately skyrocketed 20 times higher than they were before they did the survey. So, one of those kind of arguments that we hear is, oh, well, it didn't work because not enough people were complying. But now you have an official public health department doing this measurement, doing a survey saying 95+% of people are wearing masks, and it didn't matter immediately didn't matter. So, and that's just, Los Angeles is about ready to bring back another mask mandate. So it just kind of goes to show you how little data actually matters to these people making decisions, how much of it is just about, whether these other motivations, fear, panic, some measure of control. It's really disheartening to see how little data actually matters to them.
Well, it does help give that dystopian feeling of fear when you're on the streets. I mean, I remember the early stages of the pandemic. You walk around and see everybody around you masked like that. I mean, it felt like you were in something of some sort of horror movie from 10, 15 years ago. And I mean, that imprints upon us. That keeps us uncomfortable and scared. And it's not a good development societally, I mean, in general.
Absolutely. It can't be something that we tolerate as a permanent feature of life going forward. Although I feel like there's a lot of places around the world that are already kind of suggesting that's going to be the case. Like Germany has said they want to bring back mask mandates this fall. I think Ireland also said it. We've seen it, Los Angeles now, and a couple other places across the country, the United States. And I'm sure there's been plenty of calls in Canada as well for the return to it. And yet, we look at Japan right now, where we know that everybody's wearing masks in Japan, and they're breaking records. The cases are the highest they've ever been. They're much higher than they'd ever been previously in Japan, even with 95 to 100% of people wearing masks. So it just is really something that cannot be tolerated for all these societal harms, especially in schools. And it also has no significant benefits that we can tell. But it's just kind of this safety blanket, I think, for a lot of politicians to come back to.
What about physiological harm? I mean, I know that's a debatable area, but I mean, is there some harm that can be done for people trying to breathe if they are masked up? Can it cause consequences physically?
Yeah, and there hasn't been as much great research done on this as you would like, because I think there's not been a lot of willingness to tackle this subject for fear of being ostracized by the research community or scientific community. But from what I had seen, there are definitely possibilities of breathing difficulties, and also a lot of these. If you go back and look at pre-pandemic planning, a lot of documents from the World Health Organization and others mention the possible harms of mask wearing. Of course, that's all forgotten now because it's politically beneficial, but there's breathing problems. You can have anxiety. You can have increased stress. I think there's also, you can inhale things that come in, that get trapped in the mask, that can be damaging. And as well as many other environmental impacts with masks as well. So it's really kind of inexcusable and indefensible that a lot of these harms have just been ignored because they want to promote the policy and not engage in a trade-off discussion over what are the benefits and what are the harms.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the discussion, I mean, potentially masks could have some benefit, but it would have to be, a particular kind of mask. It would have to be very disposable. You'd have to be constantly washing and changing, because that's what happens in a hospital setting, say with a surgeon or something like that. But it's just not reasonable to expect people in the public to be able to use and maintain those kinds of devices in an effective way in that circumstance.
Right, and that's one of the chapters I read in the book was kind of debunking the, well, if masks don't work, why do doctors wear them? Obviously, it's not all doctors. 2019, you weren't going to see an ear, nose, and throat specialist with them wearing a mask. It was surgeons, and surgeons wear them in theory to prevent kind of bacteria or droplets from their own mouth getting into an open wound during a surgery, or from potential blood or anything else splattering up and hitting them in the face. However, research has shown that that's not really that effective in doing that. Even where there was a study done that said that the rate of post-op wound infections was higher in a group that wore masks compared to those that didn't. So even in that specific purpose, which is not viral transmission, they don't do a great job of doing what they're supposed to do. That's obviously vastly different because, like you said, the surgeons are using them properly. They're exposing them after every use. They wash their hands. The general public doesn't do that and never is going to do that. So even if they were ever going to work, it was unrealistic to expect them to work in the general public, considering nobody can use them properly.
Yeah, and then something else that somebody pointed out, they're just sick of seeing the pollution from it. Like, these are other costs. I mean, yes, most responsible people would properly throw away a mask, but unfortunately, that's probably almost the most common piece of garbage you see laying around nowadays, or discarded masks. And there's an actual cost. Even if masks are relatively cheap, when you're talking about hundreds of millions of people wearing them, this is expensive. I mean, we got better things to spend our resources on.
Yeah, obviously we're going through a lot of economic problems right now, especially in the United States and obviously elsewhere around the world. And spending billions and billions and billions of dollars on something that didn't work and has demonstrable harms to it is about as big of a waste of money as you can get. And as you say, it's like these are environmental disasters and mini environmental disasters. They're not biodegradable. They're filled with plastics. And for people that claim to care so much about this, that we want to ban plastic water bottles or ban plastic bags in California. They have no problem with billions of plastic masks ending up in oceans, ending up in lakes and streams, and through wildlife and nature. And it's just it's hypocritical, honestly, and it's really frustrating that there's been little discussion about the all these downsides to it.
Yeah. So another downside I just like to bring up and remind people of too. Like, I don't hear very well. And I kind of supplement my hearing a bit with, I know my wife gets up in case I should get a hearing aid, fine, but with a little bit of lip reading. And I tell you, when somebody's wearing a mask, of course, I can't do that at all. And for people who are fully hearing impaired, this last couple of years has been hell on them. I mean, they rely, a great deal on conversing with people, and masks have taken that away from them. I mean, I'm just saying that these costs, that people don't like talking about them, but we got to list them out before we talk about bringing in new mandates.
Yeah, and that, again, that's one of the biggest things I think that a lot of the media as well has really abdicated. A lot of major media outlets have completely avoided having any discussions about these harms and trade-offs because they have been supportive of the policy. They've personally been scared. They also kind of want to believe in the experts and follow the science, quote unquote. And so I think there's been a general avoidance of discussing any of these trade-offs, and they are significant. And that's a really great point about bringing up people that need to see faces in order to communicate well, and how we've kind of abandoned them out of fear and panic without really any evidence or data to back it up. I'm hopeful that a lot of places are never going to go back to mandates, but you do see that there's going to be a temptation, because once you let this out of the box that, masks stop respiratory viruses, there will always be a reason, an excuse to bring it back. COVID's never going away. The flu is never going away. We're always going to have respiratory virus transmission. And so now kind of pretending that masks work sets it up to be a semi-permanent thing.
Well, the rallying call has always been to follow the science. They seem to love that when we want to jump into intrusive government policies. But in this case, I mean, it's pretty stark, and you don't have to be a specialized scientist to take numbers and comparatively look at them. The science is pretty clear on this. They're not offering a good benefit. I mean, is this a way maybe we can finally push back, though, and say, well, let's follow the science then, and just not bring in these bloody mandates? Like, what can we do to stop them from coming in?
It's a great question. I wish I had a one-stop answer. I think that continuing to further the discussion about the harms, continuing to show these comparisons, to speak back forcefully against mandates, show the data, show the science, show the evidence. That's really all you can do. You can try to vote out the politicians that have put in these policies and have maintained that they're going to bring them back. Other than that, there's really not that much you can do. I think one thing that we've all learned, especially in the United States, is that whereas you might not never have known who your local in the U.S. county supervisors are, county board of supervisors. that's really important, because a lot of times these people, the authority to speak up against local public health bureaucrats who are overwhelmingly scared, ready to go back to masks at the first opportunity. So getting involved at a local level and trying to kind of drive change from the ground up and saying, you guys are trying to mask our kids in schools. You've been trying to force this on us for the next, for 2 years, and you're going to keep trying to do it forever. We're not going to let that stand. And I think that will have the greatest impact on the most people's lives if they can kind of change at this local level.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, it's engaged people who weren't engaged before. And as you said, seeing some of these bureaucrats who were always actually there, you just never really paid attention to them or knew who they were. But now you know who to at least send your concerns to. So, I mean, I guess you want to send those concerns and be well informed. So before I let you go, where can people find your book and where your other writings are on the subject?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble as well. Basically anywhere, ebooks as well, anywhere ebooks are sold. I've been writing for Outkick.com. Just started that a couple months ago, so I write about COVID there pretty frequently, and I've been writing a Substack as well. And obviously, there's pieces that show up on Brownstone too. So, kind of a couple different places.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your work on it and coming on today to discuss and share a bit of it with us. Well, let's hope we can win the battle in the long term here.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
All right, thank you. So that was author Ian Miller of the book was Unmasked, the Global Failure of COVID Mask Mandates. I mean, the title kind of says it all. And it's, we need to have these discussions. We can't be shouted down. I said it before. I think we can excuse people who were afraid before, people who we never studied into the efficacy of masks 5 years ago. Nobody normal looked into that. And when we hear about a pandemic going around and we're nervous and we're wondering how much this is going to harm us or seniors or vulnerable people, the early part of the pandemic, okay, if this will help, let's throw it on. I mean, we want to slow this down until a vaccine can be effective or something. The numbers are in. The numbers are in. We can't pretend anymore that we don't know. And the masks just don't help. It's kind of as we said before, and as we were discussing, I mean, maybe in that circumstance, if you're constantly changing them, constantly sanitizing your hands, wearing those, whatever they're called, N95, but that's not realistic. And as well, the thing that a lot of people refuse to discuss is the cost. That's been the whole thing, whether it's the lockdowns, restrictions, and masking. Cost, benefit. And I mean, right now, we're getting hard enough time showing any benefit as it is. Even if there was a bit of benefit, though, how does it weigh up against the cost? And there's a number of costs. And as I said, even the physiological cost of the mask, it's not a lot, but when you're talking about hundreds of millions of people, that's a cost. It's a cost in pollution. It's a cost socially with us looking at each other. It's a cost in the children's development. It's a cost in just us socially being afraid and walking around in this bizarre masked world. If you want to debase and degrade somebody, mask them, cover their face, read up the Man in the Iron Mask. I mean, this has been long known. Look at bondage fetishists out there. I mean, one of their favorite things is to mask a person up. It's demeaning. It's humiliating. And if I'm not going to see a benefit from it, I don't want to wear it, especially if it's forced. There's where it gets to again. I will throw one other thing out. There's still some people, and most don't, but there's some people get on the case of other people when they see them wearing a mask. Hey, if they're more comfortable in it, go for it. By all means, wear a whole GIMP mask with a zipper on it. Wear an N95 mask, wear a gas mask, wear a thong on your face. I don't care. Just don't tell me what to wear. There's where we have no problems. You wear what you want. I'll wear what I want. And I believe in private businesses being able to do whatever they like too. And I know some people differ with me on that, but no, I'm with it. If a private store wants to say masking only in here, fine. I just won't shop there. And look, they aren't doing that because it's not going to work. They know that. And there's some of the irony, when we saw the head of the Canadian Calgary Chamber of Commerce, I'm forgetting what her name is. It doesn't matter. She's completely inept when it comes to business, even though she heads the Chamber of Commerce. And she was talking about when we lifted the mask mandates, how this is going to harm businesses because people feel more comfortable going into them when there's mask mandates. And if they don't have to wear masks and if they don't have to show their vaccine passport, they're not going to go to the businesses. Total incompetence. She has no idea, obviously, but she was just a business writer. She never actually ran one. That's why. But these are the bureaucrats. These are the senior people. These are the ones that influence people like city halls and things like that. And we had that one virtue signaling bar in Calgary that says, we're going to keep the the vaccine passports because we know our hipster customers want it and they will come flooding to us and they will like it and we'll become a specialized place that's safe and we'll do really well. That lasted for like 2 weeks. They got rid of it. People weren't coming out. So again, hey, it's your choice, absolutely, but it's a stupid choice. I mean, we kind of started that earlier. Like I said, Valbella, that guy had the choice to go on an anti-trans, anti-gay tirade in an email. It's his choice, but he's paying a pretty terrible price for it. His business. I feel bad for the staff, the other staff, and his partners and so on. And as I said, it's a business that's been there for nearly 50 years, and I got a feeling it might not survive this. But hey, leave it free and open. But that's not the way of bureaucrats. They don't want to do it that way. They want to legislate it. They want to force it. Gil McCowan, old Gil, he's got some real special talents, that guy. If he can get out of an impaired ticket and with the best of them. He was trying to sue the government to force masking in schools. Why so hung up on it? And, they want to force it in city halls that want to force it. It's a power thing. It's a power thing. Cut it out. Reason with me. Don't tell me. Try reasoning with me. You'll get a lot better results out of me. But I mean, how often are our stories constantly on this with just infringements on our freedoms? Dave talked about that. Naylor, our news editor, when I checked in with him earlier. With the police, they had a funding blacklist, right? So they had a blacklist of names of the crowd funders linked to the Freedom Convoy, according to Access to Information Records. A list of individuals and their credit ratings. And it was sent to a Crown bank. Like, the government doesn't think twice about stepping on our individual freedoms, whether they're privacy, movement, or protest. This year, we have stepped back so far in individual freedoms with that imbecile of a prime minister imposing the War Measures Act. I mean, I'm still going to keep calling it that. I know it's the Emergencies Act. Yes, they called it that once they changed it from the War Measures Act. And what it is martial law. It is. It's not an exaggeration. Look up to the definitions and see martial law. That's what happened when you are stepping on individual rights to, pass something along. When you set them aside for a supposed emergency. So, this government has just gone so beyond the pale. And the convoy, that was just the latest thing. That was just the latest infringement, but it was huge. And the repercussions are still happening. And this government does not want to let go of power. So, I mean, here we are. Yeah, they're sharing your credit rating even with police officers and things like that. And searching out things from people who donated to, GoFundMe accounts and that. It's not a good period right now. And here's an interesting one, though. Now the House of Commons Ethics Committee is going to investigate whether the RCMP spied on parliamentarians. This is funny. This is ironic. Now they're getting mad because they discovered that this federal police force that they've empowered so much to step on the privacy and individual rights of other citizens, it turned around and bit themselves on the ass. Hey, yeah, they're actually spying on you too. Go figure, you morons. I mean, hey, you're supposed to be the same as every other citizen, so now you're upset. Well, maybe you should have spoke up before giving the RCMP so many extraordinary and emergency powers, huh? So yeah, I mean, this follows an admission from police. They use spyware to monitor smartphones. And again, I don't think the House of Commons was all that considered, worried about that until somebody raised their hand and said, wait a minute, does that include ours? Yes. Oh, now we got a problem. Yeah, now we got a problem. So covertly and remotely obtained data from targeted computing devices. This is the term from the inquiry of ministry on this. And it's a conservative MP who's been pushing on it, but I mean, all of them are getting a little worked up with this. And so they use spyware capable of downloading all the information logged on a smartphone, including email and other private communications, photographs, videos, audio files, audio recordings of private communications, electronic documents. There could be some people keep everything on their phone now. It's not a minor incursion on your privacy. Electronic documents, people on a smartphone now could potentially have business documents that they want to keep discreet, things that you would normally keep in a locked file cabinet, things that you would keep secure. I mean, there could be secrets in there that, again, they're not criminal. They're just things that you don't want shared in public. Notes, calendar entries, spreadsheets, or your personal videos. I mean, maybe you were dancing around the room with that mask on and a feather duster shoved up your butt. That's your personal video and your personal business. We don't need the police downloading that and viewing it for their own titillation. This should be very serious. You should not have blanket abilities to get into people's devices or private possessions whatsoever without a warrant. I mean, that should be individually granted to be able to search into things like that, not just a blanket thing. But now these guys in the House of Commons have realized it applied to them. And I tell you, if there's any clowns that were going to have some weird perverted videos on them, come on, look at our MPs. These guys are all wacko. Even that last Liberal who can't even get through 2 Zoom meetings without somehow showing his wang. So, yeah, it's all bouncing back on them. Speaking of incompetent government, I'm always speaking of incompetent government. Let's see, they acknowledge they fixed a glitch in the ArriveCan app. Oh, how long has this thing been going on? The ArriveCan app. Why are we still running this bloody ArriveCan app? Again, this is a government obsessed with control. You know, they've been embarrassed across the world over Pearson International Airport being one of the most horrific airports in the world to deal with. And things such as the ArriveCan app are a large part of it. And this is trickling all the way down, crushing our tourism sector, our hospitality sectors. And now we're finding out, yeah, so it sent messages to some travelers last week telling them they needed to quarantine, even though there were no signs that they had COVID and they were vaccinated. Now, I mean, your Canadian drones are visiting other type of tourists and everything. Some of them might just blindly, oh, well, that sucks, and then lock themselves up. Because you got to remember, everything on that app comes with a threat. It's a gun to your head. It's not a suggestion. You got to remember that this is something saying, we will fine you $5,000 or potentially arrest you if you don't quarantine yourself. And they, oops, we accidentally forced a bunch of people into quarantine that didn't need it. Get rid of this app, you incompetent idiots. Man, this is not a lack of damage. This is a lack of competency, but they won't, because this app controls things for them. It's all about control. It's always been about control. And man, it says, oh, well, the warning was sent to roughly 3% of travelers and appears only to have affected Apple devices. So what? And only 3%? Like 3 out of 100 people being told that they have to quarantine when they didn't have to quarantine, basically putting them under house arrest is what it is. And this is not a minor problem, but they push that along to the side. I mean, here's a neat one too. So I'm seeing Greenpeace. Yes, our favorite extreme green activists. They're advertising. They're holding a basic action training session in Toronto. Yes, in a couple of weeks. No, I think it is in September. So yeah, they're actually going to train you on how to break the law, how to block streets, how to hang off of bridges. Again, we're chasing Tamara Lich literally across the country and harassing and hounding her. Meanwhile, these professional protesters, these ones who make literally a career out of it, are holding training camps in the open about how they can basically cripple our economy and shut us down repeatedly over and over again. Are they going to arrest these guys when they do their things and keep them in without bail? Of course they won't. Usually they arrest them, they don't even charge them. If they do charge them, they get bail right away. There's a gross double standard when it comes to protests out there right now. And Greenpeace, these guys are nuts. You know, I'm tired of people trying to act as if Greenpeace is some sort of rational environmental group. There's one of the ones that you got to follow the money. This is a corporation that's international, that is employing a whole lot of people, making a hell of a lot of money, and using useful idiots to stick them out there for their protest efforts all over the place. Like, these guys are extreme. Yet we accept them having training sessions in the middle of our cities on how to attack our own industries, our own economy, and stop you from getting to work. I mean, and where do we go with this, right? Let's see another story out of Dave there. Yeah, the Department of Canadian Heritage, so they spent $1,024 studying how to dispose of a firearm. I mean, you know, people say, yeah, it's just a drop in the bucket. Yeah, with the size of our budgets, that is a drop in the bucket. But really, if they're going to flush the small amounts, they're flushing the bigger amounts. I could use $1,000 right now for something. I'm sure I could use something better than trying to find out how to do something that I can just walk up to any police detachment and say, hey, I want to dispose of this firearm. They'll say, thank you, take it away from me, and they'll go dispose of it. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated, unless you are a bureaucrat. Then it's complicated. Then you suddenly can't seem to figure out how to do these things. I like the comments out of Franco Terrazzano. We have him on quite often, actually, because he's the one who found this one. It's the bureaucrats have somehow managed to turn a free service into a $1,000 bill for taxpayers. He said, hopefully the bureaucrats of Canadian Heritage don't play roll up the rim and turn a free coffee into a $10,000 expense. There's just no, I love seeing these things. I mean, I don't know why people entrust them so much of their life, their security, and their money to the government when you see so many examples of just how incompetent bureaucracies are and ineffective. I mean, they're a necessary evil. I'm a libertarian-minded guy. I want to see minimal government. I understand we'll always have to have some, but you want as little as possible. And how can you not read these crazed examples of what they do with the money they take from you and not realize that? We don't need more government, guys. Government's the problem, not the solution. All right, let's bring our next guest in, and that's Tammy Nemeth. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Dr. Tammy Nemeth. She's a historian and a host of the Nemeth Report. How you doing? Okay. You may be muted there, Tammy. We're not getting sound out of you. You can just check your devices, and we'll see if we can get some sound coming. Do you hear me at all? Okay, apparently not. So we'll just put Tammy into the lobby there for a bit and sort out the sound issues and such. Maybe Nico can send a message. Either way, yes, we wanted to talk to about some of the things of the International Sustainability Standards Board and some of the other efforts and terminology that we've got going on right now with basically a tax against our energy sector, and it's always couched in these international initiatives with these long words, but ESG, I mean, those are terms that just make me cringe the second I hear them. Perhaps we got that sorted out. Hey, how you doing?
Good. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, you're coming in great now. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. As I always say on the show, we do live. That comes with some different hiccups, but it still makes for a better interaction. So I appreciate you coming on to join us today. And, there's just so much going on. I mean, we got a world in an energy crisis. We've got a country that's sitting on some of the best energy resources on the planet, yet we still seem to be determined to shut ourselves in.
Absolutely. And there's this new global baseline standard for sustainability and climate-related financial disclosures, which is basically ESG on steroids. And it's been drafted by this organization called the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation. Now, Canada is one of the 140 jurisdictions that follows the IFRS standards, and they're meant to provide some level of standardization of accounting standards in the world. Now, after COP26, a new International Sustainability Standards Board was created out of the IFRS, and its goal is to create a global baseline for accounting for carbon emissions, anything related to sustainability, climate, and they have three building blocks: sustainability, climate, and then industry-specific standards. Canada has agreed to support this initiative. We lobbied for, and we got one of the ISSB offices in Montreal. It was inaugurated at the end of June. Then at the same time, we created the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board. And its job, they said, is to work in lockstep with the ISSB to implement this new baseline in Canada. So right now they've issued a proposed draft standard. It's open for comment until Friday. So time is quite short to put in your opinion about what this thing means. And although hydrocarbons are the main target right now, agriculture is affected, and pretty much every industry that operates in Canada. There's 68 industries that fall under this standard for accounting for a person's climate footprint.
Well, yeah, and they use the word sustainability. That's kind of been a loaded word for quite a long time because you can just read so many things into it to push a further agenda, and it's pretty subjective objective. What somebody would define as sustainable. I mean, they can point to anything and say it's unsustainable and we need to reduce it, but they don't go any farther with that. And right now, as you said, it's hydrocarbons, and yeah, there's quite a move on our farms. Like it just seems like madness when we're all suffering from cost of living increases.
Exactly. And the cost to implement this for small businesses or even large businesses, when the Security Exchanges Commission was doing something similar in the United States, their comment process ended in June. They estimated to comply with these new standards would cost a company up on average $644,000 a year. Now, how is a small mom and pop operation or a small oil producer or a farmer or a rancher supposed to pay $644,000 to comply with all these new standards? Like one of the things that they include is the monitoring of scope 3 emissions. Now, a lot of this sounds arcane, right? You've got scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. What does all this stuff mean? Well, scope 3 is everything. So whatever a company produces, they're supposed to follow it down the value chain. Who's using it? How much are they using it? How are they disposing of it? How did the product get to somebody? What happens with it down the road? They're supposed to account all of that as part of their emissions profile. So the more you produce stuff, the higher emissions profile you're going to have, which would seem rather weird that you're trying to basically cut down businesses that produce things. So then we'll all become a service economy, I guess. That works.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems so inane and unreasonable. I mean, the term we hear a lot too is that ESG, so environment, social, and governance. But I mean, again, and that's loaded as well. I mean, now you got to start talking about social impacts, and well, that's all over the map. But I mean, part of the problem I see is companies won't push back on this. Like they're beaten into silence. They're afraid to speak up, and they keep complying and complying. And to be honest, I think they're kind of somewhat the authors of their own destruction until they stand up for themselves here.
Absolutely. And there's no way a company can comply out of this. You just can't. It'll permeate everything. And like with the oil and gas companies, if you're an exploration and production company, they want you to account for the embedded emissions in your reserves, which will count against a company, because the standard is meant to be used by banks, by insurers, and investors. So if they're trying to limit the amount of emissions in their overall portfolio, what are the odds they're going to support a company that has large reserves? Because those reserves will be counted against the company. So in a time of energy insecurity, as you mentioned, why are we adopting a policy or a standard that will basically compromise our oil and gas reserves? Well, they'll be counted against a company.
Yeah, and some of those bars, I mean, one of the things that people forget, and it drives me bananas when I hear from some people saying, oh, Energy East was shut down because it wasn't financially viable. Well, no, it was shut down because the government made it financially unviable. It was always viable before that. And the big one was they were going to make the producers responsible for downstream emissions. Well, you don't know what the end user is going to do with that product. Maybe they're going to consume it in a non-emission sort of manner. But I mean, it's something you can't commit yourself to, so the investors pulled out.
Exactly. And honestly, for what's supposed to be an accounting standard, why would you require companies to account for something they're not in control of? Usually in accounting, you can only account for things for which you're responsible. And therefore, if you misstate something or you omit something, you can be held liable because that's under your control and you didn't report properly. But with this, it really leaves companies open to litigation for mistakenly say something, or they omitted something that an activist investor thought they should have included. So it'll open up a can of worms for litigation for companies, and it's really death by 1,000 cuts.
Well, and likewise, just like in the case of Vancouver with their lunatics and city council are suing oil companies for global impacts while overlooking all the benefits, of those long lifespans and not freezing to death in winter. But I mean, it's the same sort of principle. They want to hold companies responsible for downstream emissions when they had no control over those to begin with.
Exactly. And if I can just segue a bit into agriculture, because with the new fertilizer ban or reduction that they're putting forward, what this standard does is it says that if you're a livestock producer and you sell your livestock to, say, JBS or a big meat producer, that meat producer will require you to say whether or not you operate in an area of high or extreme high risk water stress. Well, if you look on, and they use the World Resources Institute Aqueduct program, very controversial. The data is not so good. They don't use provincial data or anything. And if you're found to be in one of these areas, you could be denied funding from the banks, or the producers will say, look, we've committed to reducing our sustainability stresses in areas of high to extreme high risk water. So I'm sorry, we can't take your livestock, we can't take your grain. So it's yet another attack on agriculture at a time of food insecurity, where these poor ranchers and farmers are going to be held to account for emissions and operating in high to extreme high risk water areas. And if I can just point out, that's pretty much all of Western Saskatchewan, or Western Canada, Southern Saskatchewan, Southern Alberta, Southern Manitoba, all fall within that region. And it also happens to be the region for fracking, where the Bakken plays are, where all the major shale plays are in the United States. Almost all of them fall within an extreme or extremely high water stress area.
So it looks like we could be binding ourselves to this agreement or these policies in a few days. What sort of enforcement, though, is there if we sign on? I mean, we get a lot of these things, they're aspirational, they talk about it, but they don't actually mean to follow through, or maybe they do mean to, but they've always failed. I mean, we've never hit even close to an emissions target yet. What sort of trouble could we get in if another government comes in the future and says, well, we're not going to comply with this?
By doing the IFRS standard, the banks will do it. So it's a way for governments to get around the bad press and the anger that will come. It'll be left to the banks, the insurers, and the investors who sign on to this. If Canada, with its Sustainability Standards Board and its Montreal office for this, if they agree to implement it, there might be a possibility down the road that a future government can say, you know what, I don't think we want to do this. We're going to say it's not enforceable in Canada. But if all the banks are saying we want this, it'll be difficult. It'll be difficult to do. And that's why they're doing it this way, so that no one can escape. And Brian Moynihan of Bank of America was very clear in May when he said, this is a way that no one can escape from it, to bring it in through the accounting standards, because it'll just become another part of accounting and no one will escape.
It sounds insidious. As you said, there's a few days to write letters. As one of my commenters, Brad, said, the $1 million question, what can we do about it?
Well, I've been encouraging as many people as possible to write a comment letter, expressing your support of the Canadian oil and gas industry, emphasizing energy security, no scope 3 emissions, no scenario analysis, stop the water stress thing, because it will just devastate Western Canadian agriculture and our petroleum industry that operates in the Bakken Plains or even in the Western Sedimentary Basin, because that pretty much falls within that high stress area. So you can send a letter to commentletters@ifrs.org, and they post them probably within 24 hours. So if you send a letter, it gets up there right away, and it's a way to at least express discontent before it gets implemented here in Canada.
Great. And where else, before I let you go, then can people find more information about this than, to find those addresses and that if they haven't written her down?
I wrote a report about this called Counting Carbon Molecules. It's on my website, which is the NemethReport.com. And it has links to my podcast, my op-eds that I've written recently, and this new report about it. And I have the information there on where they can go to submit comments at ifrs.org. So please go to my website, check it out. It's thenemethreport.com.
Great. And then help me correct the pronunciation of your name, as I was asking at the start of the show. So Nemeth Report. Okay. I appreciate that. Well, thank you for coming on today. There's still a few days to go. Hopefully some folks get there. Maybe sometimes common sense prevails. It seems we usually have to fight pretty hard for that to happen, though. So thank you very much for coming on today, and I hope we can talk again down the road.
Thank you so much, Cory. Have a good day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you. So yes, this was Dr. Tammy Nemeth. And speaking of what basically we're going to be bound into a backdoor way. So they're using accounting principles, like they bury it. It's just so, as I said, the term I use is insidious. They're always looking for another way to sneak these things in, to push these things in, and to corner and stop. And as some commenters were saying, it's hard for businesses to stand up to these because they can get shut out of business. I know, but also I'm getting tired of the Quislings in the energy sector. I'm tired of the CNRLs and the Shells who keep capitulating and saying we're going to change and we're going to do this and apologizing for themselves all the time, because you know what? It's never enough. It's never enough. They will just take more and more. You're dealing with ideologues, not with rational people. So quit trying to make a rational approach to them, because you're not going to win. Citizens, of course, and that's why the letter writing is important. I mean, try to express ourselves. But I do think these businesses have to stand up as well and realize that if you don't, they're just going to keep steamrolling. And yeah, now they're using the banks to do it. And that's something the environmentalists have been doing for a while. When they talk about divestment and they're trying to push the insurance companies away from capital projects or from investors away from these things as well. And they're castrating these companies financially. But what's it doing when it comes down? Again, there's only one consumer, and it's us. We pay higher prices. We deal with energy shortages. So this is going to hit the agricultural area, so we're going to have food shortages. And this is happening right in front of us. And we're not hearing nearly enough about it. So again, look up Dr. Tammy Nemeth and check that out. Get on there, write a letter. There's a few days left. Brad saying, do you think they'll even read it? Maybe, maybe not. But you're guaranteed nothing if you do nothing. So there's little to be lost in pushing back and trying. I mean, that's as Melissa said, same thing. It's worth the shot. We got to keep trying. I just can't give up. I get cynical a lot. I get tired. I get angry, but we can't give up. And let's see about getting the address in the video area. I'm not sure, Brad. I've limited controls here while I got the show on the go. But I would suggest the best way, like I said, is to look up Dr. Tammy Nemeth, and you'll find her website, and you can get all that information there as well. So, lots of stuff to cover and going on. Okay, I got to speak to a sponsor quickly before I move on to some more news items. And that is, speaking of rights, speaking of freedoms, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys are a fantastic group. You don't even have to own firearms to take out a membership with these guys. If you support your neighbor's right to own, enjoy firearms, trade firearms, collect firearms, target, shoot, hunt, all of those things, these are the guys standing up for them. These are the ones sharing those resources. It's an association. There's other things beyond, just the lobbying. I mean, you can get links to trade shows, to events. They also keep you up, though, on news and things that are happening. But they advocate very strongly for your right, because we got a government that's trying to take it away from you. And Tony Bernardo has been a fantastic advocate for years with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. So if you are not a member of them yet, I strongly suggest you become one now. It's good for yourself. It's good for your other neighboring firearm owners. And again, as I said, it feels futile, but we'll never win unless we push back. All right. And Anna Laurie Pear is asking the correct spelling of Nemeth. Yes, that's it. Nemeth. So you should be able to find her. And again, see some of the work she's done as well in covering a lot of these things. So let's see here. Speaking of the farmers, this was something interesting, because I saw the only reason this is noteworthy, because I've been talking about it day after day anyways, though, was an Associated Press story actually was out on Dutch farmers protesting the government, and they were dumping manure and garbage on highways, I guess, over in the Netherlands, and are still pushing back quite hard on the fertilizer bans that their government has been doing. So maybe the mainstream is finally starting to pay a little attention to these protests that have been going on for a long time, because what we're seeing in Canada is foreshadowing, is what it is. It's what's going to happen here. We're attacking our food supply. This is, as I said, they're ideologues. They're not rational people. Look at Justin Trudeau. He is not a rational man. He's a nut, and not a smart one even. At least if we get some lunatics in a James Bond movie, at least they're smart and conniving, but Trudeau's not even all that bright. But we're paying a terrible price for it. But again, he never has to worry about how to pay a grocery bill or make the rent or make a car payment or a mortgage payment. He's a trust fund baby. And a lot of these people in cabinet, his associates and these senior bureaucrats, these are people of privilege. It's funny, they like to go after, oh, everybody else is this white privilege or that crap. No, the real privilege are those elites, the Laurentian elites, that small group of people who really do control this nation. And these are guys that have no understanding how it is for the common people on the ground, no idea the pressures they put on when they bring in these ideologically driven legislations, these initiatives that are only going to make things more expensive for us and cause us more trouble. And boy, we're signing into this in a couple of days. Great. You know, we sign these treaties. As I said, we typically don't follow through. We're typically incapable of managing to meet these targets, even though we set very aggressive ones all the time. But, you know, we can sure hurt ourselves a hell of a lot in trying, though, can't we? And here we go. Let's see what else is popping up on the Western Standard for the top stories right now. Yeah, those 2 men arrested for the Surrey murder of that acquitted mass killer. That was one of the Singh Maliks. Going all the way back to the 80s, you know, that was a travesty in Canada that a lot of people forget about, with the Air India bombing back then. I mean, that was the worst mass murder in Canadian history. That happened on our soil, and people forget about that. And there was a number of gentlemen charged, and it took the cops years and years to charge them. By the time they charged them, the evidence had gone too cold, and they acquitted them all. I don't know if they were guilty or not. I certainly wouldn't say that if they haven't been proven in a court of law. And if they were the incorrect man, fine, but they never charged anybody for that murder, like never convicted anybody of it. You know, not in a realistic way. So not only was it one of the worst murders in history, they got away with it, but there's still some terrible things happening in that community, and quite a gang war going on. And these guys are now shooting each other over in Vancouver. Vancouver's had some crazy stuff. Our reporter out there, Reed Small on the West Coast, has been writing a lot about the strange shooting of transients, you know, that, and then the Langley shootings. This world just seems to be going mad sometimes. But I got a feeling this thing's always kind of happened, but we get so much exposure to it in social media too. You can't avoid it. You see it. And it just gets depressing sometimes turning on the news. But let's see, somebody there, Tracy, saying, you know, what's it going to take for Canadians to stand up for our farmers like people in the Netherlands are? I'll tell you, Tracy, it's going to take a kick in the ass. You know, we're complacent. We're lazy. When it's not directly hurting us, when we're still getting by, we don't do anything. Canadians have prided ourselves on our politeness, on our I'm sorry, our apologies all the time, on being laid back. And unfortunately, that's not a virtue. It's not a virtue at all. I mean, being rude isn't a virtue either, but we have this thing about not standing up for ourselves. But I tell you what, and I said that on the show the other day when I was speaking with somebody too, when you can't pay the bills, nothing else matters. When you suddenly might be facing losing your home, whether it's a rental or a mortgage, you're not going to care if Prime Minister Dingbat wants to make more emissions targets and hold hands with people at UN meetings. It doesn't matter to you anymore. If you are actually worrying because your kids are going to school hungry, you're not going to care about Guilbeault wanting to shut down industries in the West. When you're suffering that way and that directly with that stress, that's when people will get up. And that's when no amount of environmental fear-mongering or COVID fear-mongering or any of that crap is going to stop people. It's not here yet. We got our inflation going through the roof. We got our farmers screaming for mercy as these fertilizer bans come on. We've got energy emergencies going on all over the world, and still we're putting up with it right now. So we haven't been kicked in the ass hard enough. But eventually we will. Eventually we will. I mean, even the most passive of mice, if you're starving it to death, it's going to fight for its life. And we're moving towards that. I mean, maybe not starving to death, but people are going to be living an incredibly terrible lifestyle if these ideological lunatic pushes against, you know, that are raising our cost of living are allowed to carry on. And they seem to be carrying on. So, you know, what'll it take? Well, it's going to take a little more time and a little more pain, maybe a lot more pain. But we've got to push back when we can. Let's see, Leslyn Lewis, it looks like she's not attending that next debate as well. She was kind of signaling that before, you know, with the Conservative Party. We've got to wonder, the Conservative Party's and unity within, you know, internal, that's always a challenge as well. They're always infighting. And this is the party, it seems, against Leslyn and Pierre Poilievre, or at least the two of them are had enough of the party. I don't know if a third debate was a good idea or not. I'm not managing the party, but both of those candidates said, no, I just don't want any part of it. God knows that the party did screw up the other debate badly enough earlier, with the sad trombones and the comical crap like that. But either way, there's going to be at least two candidates not attending that debate. I don't know how well viewed it's really going to be then when that comes along. Here's Peterson, in that story, as we said. I mean, Brad saying it might be too late when it's talk about things having to get worse before they get better. Peterson, Jordan Peterson's been saying kind of the same thing. He said the worst is yet to come from Trudeau. Trudeau's an ideologically driven, like I said, madman who's not terribly bright. And he's not going to stop. He's not going to stop. He's going to keep bringing these things down. And hey, it's until we push back. Brad thinks, it might be too late by the time we do. Maybe. I mean, it's never too late. We can hit bottom and bounce back, but that bottom and bouncing back might be a case of 30 or 40 years. Brad and I might not live long enough to see the bounce back. We just see the train coming. And all we can do is keep trying to point it out to people and hope they start paying attention because, man, I mean, the warnings are on the wall. This drives me nuts with inflation. I mean, I do this every few shows because I love saying I told you so. I'm not going to one of those people say I hate saying I told you so. No, I love saying I told you so. Because God knows I predict things quite often that are wrong, so that's no fun. But often I predict things and they come true. And then one of the easiest ones I could predict, and that was a year and a half ago, is that we're going to face inflation and interest rate hikes. And those are all over the place. People pointing that out a year and a half ago as the governments everywhere around the world opened the floodgates, started printing money. They devalued your currency. And then what do you think happens? The banks raise the interest rates. This is as predictable as predicting water is wet. Yet our government can't seem to figure that out. Apologists in Canada too. Oh, there's nothing Trudeau could do about it. It's around the whole world. Well, just because every country's doing a stupid thing doesn't mean it's not still a stupid thing. Every country spent like mad. So every country's enjoying this great devaluation of their currency right now, which leads to that higher cost of living. Not every country is shutting in their oil and gas resources like our idiot prime minister is with us, though. Russia actually just announced that they're expanding their oil export capacity up in the northern area of their country. Yeah, they're building more terminals and ports to sell more and get the world more dependent on them, while Canada's shutting in theirs. Guys, think harder. Think harder. It's funny. I got a memory that came up on my Facebook. It's 5 years ago today when Donald Trump blocked me on Twitter. I won't go into the whole story on how it led to that, but either way, just to say, yeah, I like some of the stuff Trump did, but for the most part, I wasn't a big Trump fan. But I keep mentioning Trump was dead right when he was warning people years ago. He was warning Germany. He said it, and they smirked at him. He said, you guys are becoming too dependent on Russian oil, and it's going to bite you on the ass. I'm paraphrasing. And they smirked and kind of laughed him off. Well, how are you sitting now, Germany? How's that working out? And still, the world is becoming even more dependent on energy from Russia because the alternatives are not there. We're not going to windmills. We're not going to electric cars. We're not going to solar. We're not allowed to dam any new rivers. And we can't get any new nuclear plants approved. So you know what? Canada might be dependent on Russian oil pretty soon, too, at the rate we're going, which is so ridiculous and almost obscene considering we're sitting on top of so much of it right now. So much. It's an ugly future going on. So let's talk about some other things. If you haven't caught it, by the way, I mentioned it earlier and she was on. Melanie Risden put out the first of her series, and it's a series called COVID Freedom Heroes. She's got 7 of them, I believe, in the can. We're going to be releasing those regularly. It's like a documentary series. And last night's episode was with John Carpe with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And it was very well viewed last night. Check it out on the Western Standard, Facebook site or our Rumble channel, spots like that. You can see it. And it's a really good watch, and more of them are going to be coming out as well. Linda Slobodian, she's a columnist and has written a lot of stuff, and she's been working. I had her on the show last week to talk about this. It's coming out on Friday, her documentary on the Afghan debacle, on how basically Canada let down its allies in Afghanistan. She interviewed a number of retired generals on it, and is all put together with her and Nico in a 40-minute documentary. It's going to be very informative. These are new moves for the Western Standard. It's different turf for us getting into these longer productions, these more investigative. And Linda and Melanie have both done fantastic jobs. So keep watching our channels and get in there and check those things out, when you get some time. Cheryl saying, is there a UCP debate tonight? You're way ahead of me. Yes, Cheryl, there is. It starts, I believe it runs from 5 till 7. And we are going to be streaming it. It's going to be streamed on the Western Standard channels. So you can watch that while it goes. As well, after that, I believe in the pipeline, our weekly show, it's Wednesday. We're busy, busy, busy. So Dave and Derek and I are going to get on, and we'll have that show coming out for, half an hour or so, discussing a lot of the issues and things like that. The debate that's coming up will be in Medicine Hat for people who can go there in person. It's the UCP debate. I believe every candidate's participating. The Western Standard's holding a debate. I'm pretty sure it's August 11th. You can look on this website and get tickets there. That'll only have 3 of the, I guess you could say, presumptive front runners running in it. Danielle Smith, Brian Jean, and Travis Taves. But it'll be a smaller, intimate sort of environment. You can go there. It'll be at the Rooftop Bar in downtown Calgary and check it out, get close, meet up with those candidates and their campaign teams. So there can be a lot of events to help you make up your mind and figure out who you are going to vote for. So tune in tomorrow. We got, for speaking of different parties, you're going to have Paul Hinman on, and the new maybe president of the Wild Rose Independence Party. Their fighting is still going on. They're still figuring out what's happening. It sounds like most of the members, I'm just guessing, are by far behind Mr. Hinman as the leader. But meanwhile, the board still refuses to acknowledge it. So as far as Elections Alberta is concerned, if you look on the website, it's still G-Man Mangat as an interim leader, and still Rick Northey as a president. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll clear the waters a little bit when we talk to Paul and I guess tomorrow, though. This could be going on for a while. And we're going to have Professor Trevor Tucker on. He's written a number of columns for us, usually one a week. And, he likes getting into more of those philosophical, cerebral type columns. And they're really good. They're nice weekend reads. We'll discuss a little more of that on his last couple of columns and just what he's been getting at. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. I appreciate it. And I will see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.